Hi everyone, it's James here. Welcome to another video. This is going to be a response to a video that Richard McCook put out a short while ago, and I thought it was quite interesting and I wanted to jump on it. And it was a kind of variant on the usual kind of guilty pleasures idea, which I know is doing the rounds at the moment. I know Dan's contest is happening at the moment. That's Dots and Loops, and there's been some great responses for that. Richard's thing is a bit different. He was talking about records that we possibly buy just because they are records. So they're not necessarily things that we would be ashamed to have in our collection, but if we look completely honestly at them, we might end up saying to ourselves, the reason we bought these records is not so much because of the music, because we desperately wanted to hear the music. It was because simply they are on record rather than a different format. So to imagine the thought process you'd go through, you look at the records and you say, if I had seen the CD of this record, say in a charity shop, would I have bought it or not? And if the answer to that is no, then that's the kind of record that we're talking about. I must admit, in England at least, in the UK, this is normally a symptom of shopping in charity shops. Because if you go to a proper record shop, you know, it's not difficult to find records that you actively want or are looking for, or things that jump out at you and just say, you know, buy me now. Charity shops, Goodwill, it's a bit different because often, you know, the choice is very limited, and often, well, speaking for myself personally, you know, I go digging in charity shops because I'm in town and, you know, I'm just doing other things. It makes me happy to go and have a little poke around in a charity shop. And I was talking to Richard about this in the comments on his video, and we were saying to each other, you know, maybe it's just we get a certain kind of buzz from buying a record, and it's not a nice feeling to go into a charity shop and come out of the charity shop with no records under your arm. Now this clearly can get you into deep waters because you end up possibly being the kind of collector who just literally just buys records for the sake of it. You know, you can't face not buying a record. Now when I first joined the VC, I was probably guilty of doing the thing that most of us do, which is just, you know, buying records for the sake of it. I think I have pulled back a lot from that now. But I will still buy things on impulse, not because I desperately want them or are looking for them, but just because they're there, you know, they're cheap, they're in good condition, and I sometimes think it would make me happier to walk out of the shop with a record than to walk out of there not with a record. So I'm going to go through and show you some examples of these kind of records. So I don't think any of them are what we might call guilty pleasures. Well, one of them possibly is, maybe a couple, but I don't think of these as being guilty pleasures. So let's just whiz through and I'll quickly show you what I've got. So Julie Felix, the second album, a folk singer from the 1960s. I bought this for £1.99. I've got to be honest, if I'd seen it on a CD, I'd have gone straight past it. I wouldn't have given it a second thought. Now in Richard's video, he was kind of assessing each record and deciding whether he would buy another copy if this one got scratched. I probably would actually. I mean, if it was cheap, if it was the same price, if I damaged this one and saw another one, I probably would end up buying it. I enjoyed the record. I thought it was quite a nice record. This next one is an absolute staple of charity shops. This is Jim Croce, and You Don't Mess Around with Jim. I must admit I did kind of pick this up because I do love the song, you know, his famous song Time in a Bottle, which always makes me a bit weepy. Would I have picked up a Jim Croce CD if I'd seen one in the shop that day? Probably not. Would I replace this record if it got damaged? Again, if it was cheap, I probably would. I do love that song. Now this is one I bought quite early on in my time in the VC, and it is the second album by Terence Trent D'Arby, which I bought for 50p from Bernardo's, which is a charity shop. I was never into Terence Trent D'Arby back in the day, you know, back in the 80s. He was not an artist that was on my radar at all. I bought this album because it was dead cheap. I wouldn't have picked it up if I'd seen it on CD. It actually turned out to be a great record. I would definitely buy this again. I would even probably spend up to a £5 replacing this if it got damaged. Okay, next one possibly is one of the guilty pleasures. Shirley Bassey, an absolute staple of British charity shops. I would not have picked up a Shirley Bassey CD. I grabbed this one because the cover art looked quite good. It came from the kind of early 1970s, so I thought it would be an interesting sounding record. It's in really lovely condition, and This actually is a nice record. It's quite kind of bluesy, quite jazzy, and if I lost my copy I would replace it. Wouldn't spend a lot of money on it. I would spend maybe £3, £4 to replace that record, because it is a very enjoyable album. Good songs and a good performance by Shirley. She is a bit of a guilty pleasure in the UK, not quite sure why that is. I think it's because she's quite middle of the road, you know. Okay, this is The Equals, which is Eddie Grant's old band. I wouldn't have picked this up if I'd seen it on CD. I found it for maybe £1 in a charity box. Absolutely love this record. It's great fun. I have talked about it before on my channel. It's kind of like bubblegum R&B and funk with a bit of soul, a bit of disco, a bit of pop. It's just a really enjoyable record, and it's on Music for Pleasure, one of my favourite labels. I would replace that if I lost it or damaged it. Okay, next one, again a charity shop find. I've never been a Bruce Springsteen fan. Got nothing against him really. He's somebody that I need to get around to properly and start checking out. I did used to have a Bruce best of compilation on CD, which I ended up getting rid of because I never listened to it. But I did pick up a copy of Born in the USA for £1.99 in a charity shop. I would not have bought the CD if I'd seen it. Next one is a band who were around in the 90s. I was never into them. I quite enjoyed their music, but it would never have occurred to me to buy a record of theirs, and if I saw a CD of theirs in a shop I probably wouldn't pick it up. But I did grab the album Taking on the World by Gun from my local Bernardo's store. In fact, there were two Gun albums. There was Gallus as well. They were both dirt cheap. I picked them up, and again, an enjoyable record. Wouldn't go out of my way to replace it, but I did definitely enjoy it. It's kind of anthemic, early 90s Scottish rock music. Perfectly acceptable. This next one I bought because I like one song by Erasure really. I've got absolutely nothing against Erasure. In fact, I need to check this album out more. I love the song Little Respect, but I've never owned an Erasure album. I've never owned a best of compilation on CD or anything, and if I'd seen this in a charity shop on CD I wouldn't have bothered with it. As it was, I grabbed it for £2 from a box of records in a charity shop somewhere. This one, this is After the Fire, who are a kind of 80s, slightly art, rock, pop group with a bit of a kind of electronic side to them. I picked up one of their records a while ago. I can't remember which one it was now. But I quite enjoyed it. It was okay. It wasn't good enough for me to have picked up a CD by them if I'd seen one, and if I'd seen this on CD I wouldn't have bought it. Battery's not included. I think I'd heard something about this record, picked it up for, I don't know, £1. It's not really to my taste. I will probably be getting rid of it. I'm going to finish with an album by an artist who I do like a few of his songs here and there, but I've never been a fan of his. I picked this record up because it just looked so fantastic in the shop. I bought it for about £1. It's in great condition. It's a mono recording. There's no way I would have bought it on CD if I'd seen it, but I couldn't resist. For 50p, I couldn't resist this. This is Cliff Richard and the Shadows and the soundtrack for the young ones. I just think it's such a beautiful item, and you know, it's got some good songs on it. I would replace this actually if I lost this one or damaged it and I saw another copy. So Richard's video, he was talking about the integrity of his collection and trying to, or you know, being concerned that he might be compromising the integrity of his collection by buying stuff which possibly, you know, doesn't pass muster in his eyes. I must say I don't have that concept of integrity in my collection. I've always had a real, you know, broad taste in music. I kind of pride myself on that really. And I will buy stuff that I don't know, and I will take a chance on things, and I'm not genre specific or anything. So I don't quite agree with Richard about that, you know, the idea of compromising your collection. But these are records, like I said, which I wouldn't have gone out of my way to track them down or to buy them on different formats. I probably did buy them because they were on vinyl. So there we go folks. Thanks Richard for a great little idea for a video. Take care, see you soon. Bye bye.